Today's story is about a university student who was so displeased with one of his grades that he literally got the law changed to ensure he received an A. How did he do that? Well, that's a good question. I've had grades I wasn't happy with in college, and anytime I appealed to the professors, the conversation went like this. Well, look at this question here. You give me 1 mark out of 10. I know I got the wrong answer, but if you actually look at my work, you can see I was doing it the right way. All my logic and reasoning is correct, but in my haste to finish the exam in the allotted time, I must have made a typo with my calculator or something. I just feel like I shouldn't have lost 9 marks for a minor mistake when it's clear from my work that I knew the material. Eat shit and die. 20-year-old Gregory Watson was a student of the University of Texas when he wrote a paper for a political science course in 1982. That same year, the Equal Rights Amendment, which aimed to explicitly prohibit gender discrimination, reached its deadline for ratification. Actually, its original deadline was 1979, but as that deadline approached without sufficient support from state legislatures, proponents of the amendment had the deadline extended to 1982. There was great controversy over the idea that Congress could extend the deadline for ratification of an amendment to the Constitution. Some felt that if an amendment was not ratified by the required amount of state legislatures within the ratification period, that was it. The amendment failed, and Congress shouldn't be allowed to move the goalposts. Because of this, the deadline extension was legally challenged. All this controversy inspired Gregory Watson to write his paper about it. However, in researching the topic, Watson came across the Congressional Compensation Act of 1789. Originally submitted for ratification by the first Congress under the presidency of George Washington, the act stated that any law that modified the salary of members of Congress may only take effect after the next election of the House of Representatives. However, it was not ratified by enough states to come into force and was then largely forgotten about. Watson decided to write his paper on this act, arguing that it could still be ratified and amended to the Constitution, despite being written 193 years beforehand. You see, it became custom for Congress to add deadlines for ratification of amendments in the 20th century to ensure amendments were ratified in a reasonable time frame. That's how the Equal Rights Amendment failed. But there was no explicit requirement for a deadline in the Constitution, and the Congressional Compensation Act of 1789 did not have one, so according to Watson's essay, it was still live. An interesting topic that was pertinent to current events. Sounds like a good essay. The paper was graded by one of the course's teaching assistants, and Watson received a C. Believing his research to be worth more than a paltry C, Watson appealed the grade to the course instructor. In a conversation probably not too dissimilar to the one I have had with many lecturers, Watson's appeal was declined. Then Watson made a decision probably not too dissimilar to the one I have made in many monologues to myself. This is not the end of this. Oh no, you have not heard the last of me, you bastard. You think you can pull this shit with me and get away with it? No matter what happens, no matter how long it takes, I'm gonna get you for this. You will rue the day you ever crossed me, and at your funeral, I'll be the first to throw dirt in your grave, and I'll be the last to laugh. For me, though, it usually ended shortly after the lecturer's tires had wound up mysteriously slashed. For Gregory Watson, this was about to become a monumental battle for the ages, and I do mean ages. Watson embarked on a letter-writing campaign to lawmakers across the US, urging them to ratify the Congressional Compensation Act of 1789 in their state legislatures. 38 states were needed for the amendment to come into force, and only 9 had already ratified it, mostly back in the 1790s. Although a couple had actually ratified it more recently, like Wyoming, who had approved the amendment in 1978 as a form of protest against the 1977 congressional pay rise. So there was a precedent for ratifying this century-old amendment. In 1983, Watson had his first breakthrough, with the state of Maine approving the amendment in response to his campaign. In the following years, with hundreds of letters and phone calls and thousands of dollars of Watson's own money, more and more states began to hop on to his campaign and approved the amendment. Some states were so embroiled in the drama of it all that they ratified it a second time, not realizing that their state legislature had already approved the amendment when it was first published. By 1992, after a full decade of Watson's lunatic commitment to this campaign, which persisted long after he had left the University of Texas, the amendment had been approved by 37 state legislatures and required just one more to be made law. New Jersey, who had originally rejected the amendment centuries earlier, rushed to be the state that got the amendment over the line. But they were beaten to the punch by Michigan. The Congressional Compensation Act of 1789 officially became the 27th Amendment to the United States Constitution on May 5th, 1992. 202 years and 223 days after Congress had first submitted it. The 27th Amendment has by far the longest ratification period of any amendment to the Constitution. In distant second is the 22nd Amendment, which limits the number of times a person can be elected president to 2 terms, and was passed in 1951 after a ratification period of 3 years and 206 days. Now, because of Watson's efforts in getting the 27th Amendment accepted, it is now constitutional law that any congressional salary changes apply only after the next election, preventing Congress from giving itself immediate raises. To emphasize Gregory Watson's Herculean task of changing the Constitution, the 27th Amendment is the most recent. There has not been a single amendment to the Constitution since 1992, meaning the latest amendment is actually one of the first ever written, bizarrely. In 2017, his political science course instructor learned that Gregory Watson had literally changed the law in response to a grade she had given him. After 35 years, she ultimately conceded that Watson knew how the Constitution worked and what it meant to be politically active, and submitted a form to the University of Texas requesting his grade be changed from a C to an A+. You might think that brings pettiness to a whole new level, but that's only because you're learning the story through my warped lens. In actuality, Watson has explained that he would have embarked on this campaign even if he had gotten a good grade for his paper, so strong was his interest in the subject. I'm not sure if that makes him less deranged or more. The thing that most surprises me is the fact the instructor actually changed the grade. Any of the lecturers I've known were as steadfast as you'd expect from those who'd literally never left the education system in their entire lives. In the 8 years since you gave me a D for that linear algebra exam, I have attained a level of influence over the universe that is incomprehensible to the mortal mind. With this power, I have changed the laws of Euclidean geometry to coincide exactly with the answers I gave on that test. Arthur Cayley is now wrong about matrix multiplication, and when you multiply the Pauli matrices, the answer is 12. Just as I said it was on question 4C, part 3.
You're a sophomore who realized that this amendment, which was introduced in 1789, was still available to be ratified.
Yes, March of 1982, during spring break.
During spring break,
no
when
less.
I'm at the wet t-shirt contest in Cancun, you're realizing that an amendment can still be ratified in the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.